Oh, you know you're in for a treat when you hear that music, folks, because it means it's time for another episode
Have
of
you?
the Rec Poker Podcast Forums Edition. Because it's the Forums Edition, that means that I'm your host tonight, Jim Reed or Bluffsterini in the home games. And you can find out about me and all the other members of the Wrecking Crew by going to rec.poker/crew. But we can't do it alone. We need wonderful folks like Website Amp and the Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack, and Casino to help us keep the lights on here at Rec Poker. And we also need a panel of recreational poker playing wizards that I get to join every week to talk poker strategy, and we just have the time of our lives. So, Rec Poker Wizards, let me see who's going to lead us off this time. Is it the one and only Keith Monkey System? Keith, tell the folks a bit about where they can find you.
I'm Keith Brandt, and I'm Monkey System pretty much everywhere.
And I'm Kim Kilroy. I'm Fergie56 in the home game and Pat Vet everywhere else.
And I'm Rob Washam, and I'm Rabman50, just about anywhere you can find me.
And
I'm Taylor Maas. You can find me on Twitter at Taylor_Maas, and in the Rec Poker home game as Gopher Boy TJM.
Now we're actually looking at a post from Taylor this week. Just like every week, we're playing against each other in the nightly Rec Poker home game, trying to steal each other's chips and earn a shot at one of these coveted bronze pins. And just like every week, we're going to take a post from the Rec Poker forums and talk about it here on the show. So this one, as we said, is from our very own Taylor Maas. And the post name is Big Blind Defense, very favorable run out for our range. So as some of you might know, in fact, Taylor, why don't you take a second here and talk about this? So Taylor is running our Twitch stream at twitch.tv/recpoker. He streams every Thursday night in the nightly home game and gives out prizes. He also streams various other times throughout the week. We've got some calendar events set up at rec.poker/events if you want to check that out. And there's all sorts of ways to get involved, to join and subscribe. We throw all sorts of prizes out throughout the month, so I encourage people to go check that out. Taylor, what do you enjoy most about streaming? And when it's not Thursday night, when do you tend to play?
So play on Thursday nights. We play the home game on Thursday nights. There's nothing special about the home games on Thursday nights, but it's just the night that we do it. It's Twitch Thursday. So I would say about 90% of the Thursdays I'm actually able to make it, maybe 95%, but it's fun. You know, we just hang out. We got the people watching the hands go down. We're kind of seeing how other people that are in the chat of the stream are doing and keeping track of that. But we play those Thursday nights. We also try and play the Player of the Year series the first Wednesday of the month. We play the Mixed Game series, which is the second Wednesday of the month. If I'm fortunate enough to make the Tournament of Champions, which I believe is the second Monday. There it is. I got it. We stream that as well. And then if there's anything else kind of cool going on, I'll try and stream that. But easy way to find out about that, follow me on Twitter at Taylor_Maas, or join our Discord. I'll post about it when I go live on Twitch. So 2 easy ways of finding out about that. But where this hand came from, not from the home game itself, but instead from some of the tournaments I was playing on the side. So I'll play some ACR tournaments or potentially Ignition on the side. And this was one of the hands that I played. So it was kind of one of those big blind defense spots. And we kind of get into our, that middle value type of spot. Are we good? Are we not? I don't know if you want to walk through it. I can walk through it.
Take us right through it, Taylor.
Okay, so I don't know the exact stage of the tournament, but we're pretty deep. Both effective stack sizes in this hand are 50 big blinds deep. So our opponent is in middle position with 55 big blinds. They opened to 2.2 big blinds. Everyone else folds, and we're in the big blind with 54 big blinds, and we have ace 4 suited, specifically ace 4 of clubs.
Now, just before we get any further, 2.2. Do you have any? Do you recall? Was it like a standard sizing for this player? When they got more than 50 big blinds, I don't know. I tend to wait till I get a little lower to slip down to 2.2. So I don't know if that's telling at all in this case.
I don't think it's too telling. I just read this as pretty standard. just kind of a normal open. You get a bunch of different people online. Some will go 2.5, some will go 3. Some crazy people go to 4, 4.5. But the standard, I would say, is probably around this 2.2 or just 2. So I think either one's just kind of read as just a normal open from our opponent. But so the stage of the tournament, it looks like I do say we are getting close to the money. So we're not on the bubble, but when I say something like that, I would say something like 100 pay, and we're probably like at 175 left or something like that. So we have a good stack. We have a pretty speculative hand. I mean, we could turn this into a bluff 3-bet, but I think just the stage of the tournament, I decide I'm not going to 3-bet with this. So I'm just going to call. Other person has a big stack. We'll just see how it plays out from here. So heads up, there's 5.8 in the middle. We get a flop of Queen of Diamonds, 4 of Hearts, 5 of Hearts. So I think this is a pretty decent flop for us. There's one Broadway type of card, just the Queen. Potential that they hit top pair, but we hit a pair. We hit bottom pair. We don't have any club draw, so our flush potential goes out the window. We do have a potential for a backdoor straight, which we shouldn't get too attached to, but really what we have is bottom pair with the potential of kind of hitting an ace to give us a good 2-pair hand that our opponent may think their top pair is now good. So pretty standard spot, I think, to just check and see what our opponent does, and our opponent fires out a small bet. They go 1.75 big blinds.
So it's a down bet. It's a smaller bet than the original open, which is very popular. You can do in all of these small pots. You can use small bets to leverage the same kind of effect as you would from a bigger one. So that also seems pretty standard, I would say. As Taylor's described the hand so far, does anyone want to talk about alternatives to the action? Reasons to 3-bet pre-flop, or is anyone tempted to lead here? I always like to just examine these options to see if there's something that we're not thinking about. I like the play as called, so here we go. So we do check, get the small bet, and then we're faced with the option of folding, calling, or raising. And what do people like there?
I think I'd just definitely just call here. I think we want to try to realize any equity we have right now. If we check raise and then they do something silly like go over the top of us, or even if they call us, all we're doing is inflating a pot with bottom pair. So I think at this point in time, we just want to call and just kind of maintain our equity share.
Yeah, it reminds me of a hand we did a couple weeks ago with Keith Monkey System, where we were talking about where it was maybe even a good spot for a check raise, but that our particular hand just played better as a call. It feels to me like it's that same kind of spot there. It just feels like we've got enough equity to call here. And I kind of like, I don't want to bloat this pot or turn this into a hand where we get multiple streets of betting in with a hand like a pair of 4s here. So I like that too.
I just did a seminar on check raising from the big blind, and I think that if we had a smaller 4, like a 4-6, 4-3, 4-7, those are the kind of 4s we would want to check raise here. But when we have 4 ace, we don't need to check raise, because now if an ace hits the turn, our opponent often will fire, and we have a well-disguised 2-pair here.
So Kim, for those
We
of us,
don't need protection as much.
yeah. And so I want to
Sorry.
ask about that a little. So the other thing that the 4-6 or the 4-7 have in common is they have some draw equity to the straight here. Does that factor into choosing them as a check raise, or is it purely because it's just not as good?
Yeah, there's a lot of turns that will help us and allow us to fire again or continue with the story on a turn. There's a lot of those middling cards that help us out with those kind of hands. And also it needs more protection than ace 4 does.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, to add to Kim's point, a huge portion of that too helps out with the fact that our ace is really bad for reverse implied odds for our opponent. A lot of their like small continues here are like ace king, ace jack, ace 10, those types of things. Where if the turn comes out ace, boom, reverse implied odds, just crushing them. Where if we hit a 3 or a 7 or whatever, they're unlikely to just want to get chips in the middle. So that factor like really helps us out. It's kind of like the reverse pipping, where we get 2 paired and they get top pair.
Nice. So we do call, and the turn comes the 7 of clubs. So there's 9.4 big blinds in the pot. The board is queen of diamonds, 4 of hearts, 5 of hearts, 7 of clubs. So again, we're in this position. We've talked on this show quite a bit about the virtues of checking versus leading in this spot. Who likes a check and who likes a lead, and why? I know Taylor likes a check. Rob?
Oh, I know, I'd like a check, definitely. It's staying with the flow. It's kind of like game flow. We want to see what they do. This card probably didn't help them at all. A lot of people will take a stab on the flop, and then they'll check back on the turn if they don't improve. So this is an opportunity to see where we're at with them. If we get a bet, then we can kind of reevaluate, but at this time, I think a check is definitely the way to go.
I agree. I like a check here as well.
I don't think the lead is crazy, but yeah, I do prefer the check. I mean, the lead can be enticing because the 7 works out way better for us. I mean, they do have some 7/8s and stuff like that in their range, or 6/7s and stuff like that, but it's a small portion. So much of their continuation bets, I think, on the flop are just big cards and really either a queen or just 2 overs types of ranges. So I went for a check here just because it was kind of like, board keeps running out, I'm just gonna keep calling down and hopefully catch you bluffing.
And we see a betting sizing change here. They made a down bet on the flop, I think, which was smaller than their original open. And here they go about a 2/3 pot bet, which is typical. Like I think I always tell people it makes a lot of sense to do that small flop bet, follow it up with a bigger turn bet for a number of reasons. A, the people that don't raise your small flop bet are kind of capping their range a little bit. So you're going to get a lot of folds from that larger sizing on the turn, and then you win a bigger pot, which is great. But it also means that you have a chance to get some value in if you want with that bigger bet on the turn. So I don't think we can learn too much from the sizing of the larger turn bet, because it's still kind of in that cliche, that stereotype mode.
I would say, oh, sorry.
No, please,
I was going to say resizing here. If this is a knowledgeable player, and I don't know what sort of field you were playing against, but this is obviously a better card for the big blinds range. The big blind now has most of the smaller 2-pair combos, 5-4, 5-7, and a player that bets big like this will know that. And so this to me means that it's more likely they have value here when they bet large than just sort of saying small bet, large bet.
Yes. Yeah, because the runout definitely favors the player in the blinds for sure. We're looking at queen 7, 5, 4, 2 hearts. So
what if you don't think the player's all that great? How then would you read the situation?
Because that's a real question, right? We have to be thinking about that.
Well, if they bet half pot.
That's right. You just give them the fish tag.
If they're not that great, then we're mostly playing our hand against their range, because they're not going to see what our range is.
Great point, Keith. Great point. And just for listeners at home, I want to just reinforce this notion that Keith just brought up, which is sometimes if they're savvy, if you're playing against savvy players, you got to think about playing your range versus their range, because they're thinking about your range. If they're not savvy players, or if they're less experienced players, don't play your range. Just play your hand against their range, because you're not benefiting from the playing your entire range, because they're not thinking about it. So you don't need to balance. You should just play in a way that suits your exact hand. So Taylor, do you recall if you were in a spot here where you felt like you were playing range versus range, or you were better off playing your hand versus their range?
Most situations in most tournaments I play, I'm assuming the player's skill is below average. I'm not thinking this is a really strong player. I'm thinking, hey, this person is, just betting at me. So how I read this is they bet small, so they kind of know what they're doing, but they're also potentially just kind of stuck in this autopilot mode of, I see bet small, I see bet big, and I take it down. So I think that's a definite possibility, which then is kind of just eating away at me to try and call them down and bluff catch.
And do you have any stats on the poker tracker for them at this point? Are they, do you have any valuable stats that would say they continuation bet the turn?
I don't think I would have had enough hands versus this player.
Right.
I'm going to just assume that I don't. If I would have had that, it would have been a valuable piece that I probably would have put in there, but I didn't have anything good.
Okay.
So we're facing this 6.2 big blind bet into a 9.4 big blind pot. We've still got plenty behind. If we did want to check raise here, what are some good candidates to use for it? I always want to just think about some of the counter situations that we could be in. The flops, queen of diamonds, 7 of clubs, 4 of hearts, 5 of hearts. So a lot of the hands I'd want to be check raising with might involve, say, the 6 of hearts or something like that. What might you folks have?
Let's talk about value hands and bluffs.
Okay.
Right.
Yep.
So we're going to want to check raise all our 2 pair hands, and we're going to want to check raise our sets here.
And that'll be tricky given that we check called the flop too. So we have to be thoughtful about the hands that we would not have check raised the flop too, which is tricky.
I think a lot of people with a flop set might check call the flop, hoping to get into a situation where you can check raise the turn where the bets get bigger, and they're more likely to have a hand that they can call with. So
like a pair of 4s or 5s or something that's just doesn't want to see a heart, but is just gonna play differently when the heart doesn't come. Like that makes you're allowed to do that too, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And another thing to consider is just the sizing too, right? Like what makes the flop check raise enticing is they use a small size. Like it's cheap to check raise here. On the turn now, it's 6.2 to check raise. We're gonna have to go 15 to more than 15. That's a pretty big bet, especially when we're late in a tournament. We've got a good chip stack already, all those other things. And what hands do you really want to do that with? So we got to consider that. Like they're betting big. Like, do we want to just, if we do have a value hand like a set, just keep giving them rope? Like if we do have a set, they're kind of doing exactly what we want them to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's that spot we talked about in an earlier episode as well, where even though there's a good spot for a check raise here, I'm not sure we're at the point in our range that makes the most sense for it. We don't really have, now that the turn has come the 7 of clubs, there are no really good rivers for us that aren't an ace or a 4. So it's not the kind of spot. This would be a one and done if we were to do it with our hand. I'm not saying that we should. It would just be a one and done spot to attack a weak range. And as Taylor says, when they choose that sizing, I don't think there's any reason for us to think that it is that weak. So then is this a fold? Should this just be a fold then? Like if we think they're that strong and we have so few redraws, yeah, talk me out of a fold, Taylor, because what am I trying to ask here? How often do we need to improve to be good here?
Yeah, and it kind of gets to the classic situation, right? Like, hey, I think I might be good here,
Right.
but there's still another street to come. We're going to be out of position. There's a lot of draws that are potentially out there. Like, how do we react to this spot? Like, if you asked me, I would say I think there's a decent chance we're good. Call it 40 to 50 to maybe 40 to 50% chance that we're good here. And our opponent is just over c betting the turn, and we're just gonna find him in a spot. But the thing is, like, if that's true, say they're over betting with king jack, like there's kings and jacks left in the deck, and there's still a card to come. So, yeah, like, how do we approach all these different situations? So, I ultimately find a call just because I'm kind of like, what is their range in this spot? Like, what are they really representing and are so happy trying to get money in with? I don't know if like ace queen bets this, but that may be like one of the few hands. Everything else that they have, maybe kings and aces, we block aces. So I was just kind of like, this was kind of one of those like gut feel spots where I was just like, you know what, my gut is telling me right now that I think this guy is making a play, so I'm gonna find a call, and hopefully on the river, I get some sort of easy decision. They check back with the king jack after they miss, or they miss their heart draw, or whatever it is.
Yeah, it's one of the nice things about having that bottom pair is that, you know, you are beating a lot of the hands that he could have that he might be playing this way. So
And
there's
that
definitely
you're gonna assume that 7 didn't probably help him at all. If he's holding
Exactly,
those types of
yeah.
hands, that's
Right.
7 is just a blank for them. And like
If-
Taylor said in his post, that this is better for his range than it is for the C better's range.
Yeah, like what's the nuts right now? It's 6-8, 3-6. Those are hands in our range, not in the opponent's range. So what are they so happy with trying to get in? Granted, that's a small portion of the range. They could still have sets and stuff like that, but I just kind of looked at this like, really, on this card you're doing this? If it's jack, king, ace, I guess maybe not an ace, like anything else a little bit higher, I'm kind of more prone to fold. But with the 7, I was just kind of a little bit skeptical of what he was actually betting with here.
So we do call, and we get to the river with 21.7 big blinds in the pot. And the river comes the 3 of clubs, which is another good card for our range. Doesn't really improve our hand, as Taylor points out in the post here. And I'll just leave it with his parting questions in the post. What do we do here? Lead, check, call, check, fold. What does Rec Poker Nation think? And it's just typical of these spots that we get in. And I find this all the time when I'm defending the big blind with a bad ace, and suited or not suited. I get in this spot all the time where I get to the river. I've got one pair. It's not a very good pair, but I can't just keep folding all these ace hands. And sometimes I feel like I kind of like owe it to defend or to get this to showdown or to call a bet or something, just because where I am in my own distribution. What are you thinking in a spot like this?
Well, I personally probably would have folded the turn, but as played, if I'm going to check call the turn, I'm going to check call a small bet here and check fold to a large bet. Because if I was good on the flop and I was good on the turn, I'm obviously still good on the river, except to exactly pocket 6s. So I would just depend on what the sizing would be here for me.
Yep.
Would a reversal here, a lead, be so bad?
Yeah, good question. So we'd
Because it
be
is kind of
leading
a
out.
board changing card, because now we got probably more 6s than he has.
So it's a bluff. It's to get a better hand to fold, Keith. Is that the theory?
Yes.
Yeah, because I don't think we're getting called by a worse hand if we lead here. So we'd be deciding that we could get a better hand to fold.
So
That would
it's
be why. that would be why I would choose to lead here, would be to get a better hand to fold. I'm not sure
So
it's a good idea.
Turning our one pair hand into a bluff.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Essentially.
but with a small bet that kind of blocks and controls the pot. And one of the things here is our position in the tournament. We don't want to turn this into a big pot.
Well, I ask you, Keith, if we did have the 6, would we be making a small bet here? Probably wouldn't be making a small lead here.
Right.
If we had the 6.
If we had the 6.
Right? And if we had 2 pair already, we're probably check calling to let him
feels
bet his
like-
queen again, or
It feels like we want our opponent to fold a 7 if we lead here. That's really, I don't think they're folding a queen unless we lead really big. And I don't think we want to do that. That seems to me like, I don't think they're folding 2 pair. So they made that big turn bet when the 7 came. I think if we're leading, the only reason I would lead here would be because I wanted someone to fold a 7. I thought I could get them to fold a 7. And I think that play might be plus EV. I'm not going to do the math live on the show, but it's probably, as a whole, it's probably not as EV as the check line, because of the way that all the rest of his range that doesn't have a 7 performs. That would be my gut.
what about 8s, 9s, 10s? Are you trying to
Oh,
get
the
them to
pockets?
fold?
Yeah, good question. Good question. Did they bet that big on the turn after the
Well, like
C bet?
Taylor's saying he doesn't think that they're
Oh yeah, right.
that savvy necessarily.
Oh, if they're not savvy, then don't try and make them fold a pair. Don't try and make them fold a pair.
You can't have it both ways, right?
Yeah, no, you're right. You're right. Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, so I guess I'm leaning check. I'm leaning check as a.
I think it's a check all the way.
Yeah, good question though. I love exploring that space. So that's all we find out. Taylor didn't put the rest of the information in the hand, so we're just stuck with this sort of purgatory.
Classic Taylor, huh?
Classic Taylor's leaving us hanging.
Why
We
would I
could
do
ask-
that? How about
Couldn't we ask Taylor?
how about we
Let's
hear
get
from
him on the
Jonathan-
phone.
Let's hear
Oh,
from
that's a great
Jonathan
idea.
Little, and
You
then,
know what? That's a great idea, Taylor. Let's see what
You can
Jonathan
explain
has
a
to
little bit
say.
more.
Let's see.
You ever wondered whether you should call a preflop raise or 3-bet instead?
Yeah, why didn't you?
What do you do when you
3-bet?
have a flush draw? Do you raise it or do you just call? What do you do with ace king when you miss the flop? Are you tired of guessing about what the right play is with your particular hand? Well, my name is Jonathan Little, and I am a 2-time World Poker Tour champion and creator of PokerCoaching.com, where we offer over 1,000 interactive hand quizzes where you play a hand and then get real-time feedback from our world-class pros. Don't guess and don't stress. Just register for your free account at PokerCoaching.com/recpoker right now.
That does sound like a lot of quizzes. And who knows how many there are now, because he must have recorded that for us several months ago. So I'd be surprised if you head over to pokercoaching.com/recpoker and check that out right now. He knows what he's doing. So thanks for the segue, Taylor. That's exactly what we should be thinking about here. How to get better.
I won't keep you waiting any longer then. So, I mean, the people that were watching the stream, because this all played out on stream, would have seen what I did here. And I took a line that was something I normally wouldn't do, but something that I decided to do just because of this run out. I think normal situations, I do exactly what Kim described right away. Check, call a small bet, and then if it's a big bet, I'm probably going to end up folding. But like in the moment, like I saw it, I'm like, I don't want a flush draw to bluff me off my hand. And this run out is so good for my range. How can I like take advantage of that? So I turned my hand into a bluff. I took the lead and I didn't go small. I bet over pot on the river here. I was essentially targeting queens, 9s, 10s, jacks, all those types of hands to fold. Because I think that is one heck of a tough call for them to make when it 4 to a straight, only a 6 gives me a straight. So I decided to turn my hand into a bluff. I bet, I think 23, 24 big blinds, something like that. and my opponent snap folded.
Hmm.
So it worked out in the moment, but like, who knows, maybe they had, an ace high flush draw or something and kept betting at this, where we were ahead the whole time. We didn't necessarily need to, but I just didn't want that specific type of hand to be able to bluff me off my hand. And I turned mine into a bluff.
Yeah, I think that's the kind of sizing that's going to get those folds, right? From those hands like we were talking about, a pair of sevens or 8, 9s, 10s, jacks. And I think, yeah, probably even a queen. Honestly, you've got a ton of 2 pair there and stuff when you complete with the blind. So I think that's right.
I don't think a queen's gonna snap fold though. I think they're gonna
Right.
sit and think about it for a minute. So,
Yeah.
I mean, is this a opponent that would know enough to bluff into you with a big bet rather than just a small bet? So,
Yeah, and that's definitely part of it too. Like, what would they have done on the river? And I kind of ultimately decided, like, I don't want to find out. I'm gonna this is now my time. So I mean, we had big stacks. So I mean, we started with 54. I didn't bet all in. I essentially bet half of my stack as an or bet here. Had I gotten raised, it would have been oh man, what did I get myself into in the fold? But I don't think they can raise much here. I think it's almost impossible for them to find a raise. So I thought, let's go for as much fold equity as possible. And I mean, I had been reading stuff about, when you're on the river, you have these situations. We have the nuts in our range. How much can we bet? And it's usually like you can bet a lot, especially with your bluffs. So I kind of took that route.
So can we talk
nice.
just a couple weeks ago, we did an episode with Keith where he ended up shoving the river in a similar spot where he's out of position. He felt like his opponent was maybe in a bluffy part of their range, and he did like an overbet shove. And the analysis was that given the strength of his hand and the range of the opponent, and I guess there was some ICM considerations there as well, that we felt like a blocker bet, maybe fold to a raise, was a better play. Here, it sounds like we're saying a blocker bet is also a good play, but the scenario is different enough that the shove sort of makes more sense here. Am I outlining it correctly? Is it the ICM? What else makes it different here, Taylor?
One, ICM is huge,
Yeah.
but take ICM out of the equation for both hands. You're in a spot where, like, what is the nuts in the hand? The nuts in this hand, there's no potential for a flush. There's no paired board, so there's no potential for a full house. The nuts is the straight. The actual nuts is the 6-8 to give you, a slightly higher straight than just the 6 does. But the effective nuts is just any 6 that you have here. And then how does each of those ranges, like big blind has a bigger chunk of 6s and the opening ranges really doesn't. So that is a huge thing that changes it. In Keith's hand, in the other time, the nut hand, I believe, was the nut flush.
Yeah.
Which opener has a ton of those nut flushes, and it kind of doesn't work in the same way because now you can't represent the actual nuts in this spot. And I think that's what kind of, allowed me to, I'm going to steal the phrase from him, release the Kraken in this spot.
Nice. Well, I don't think we're going to find a better note than that. Releasing the Kraken. Yeah, Taylor.
I will say I ran this through Pile Solver because I was interested to see what it had, and it liked me folding my ace 4 about 75% of the time on the turn. It did use it as some of the bluff catchers. When Pile runs those things, it wants to keep some of those hands in there to allow for turn cards. So like if another 4 comes out, it wants you to have some 4s in your range. So it was kind of using that in that aspect. But then on the river, if I remember correctly, it took a really weird route where it was like almost all of my range just wanted to check call with the route that we took, given the exact run out, which I thought was strange. I thought it was going to want us to unleash the Kraken because we have more 6s in the range, but really it wanted us to just bluff catch. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
probably because of the flop having two suits, the guy might have been just semi bluffing with a couple of hearts, and then he missed it.
And we're
Yeah,
not
That's a
blocking
possibility. Yeah.
Yeah, it's always curious to see the assumptions that, when you put it in solvers, they're playing against, they're making assumptions about players that we shouldn't be making in the games that we're playing here.
Yeah.
But the real question is, how are the players in our games deviating from this, and how can we exploit that? How can we take advantage of them on that front? So I tell people all the time, thanks for listening, but you really got to go to rec.poker and get a free account. There's a bunch of we talk about the forum post here on the air, but usually people put a lot more detail into the forum post. You can look it up. They'll upload ranges or PDFs of different parts of their range. So if you're a visual learner, you can see what's going on in there. We got a great response to this post by Sir Gas Leak, one of our newer members who's been putting a few excellent forum posts in there. He also thinks he's folding on the turn. Sir Gaslink plays it as a turn fold, but does kind of like this idea of going for it on the river because the ranges are set up the way they are. So I like that. Thank you, Gasleak, Mr. Gasleak, for sharing that. And I guess I just want to thank Rob Washam, Kim Kilroy, Keith Brandt, and Taylor Maas for joining me this week. And of course, Website Amp and Running Aces Hotel, Racetrack, and Casino. And Steve Fredlin. Thanks for joining us, everyone. See you again soon.